Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of Soccer for Us. I am Bart, and on this episode, probably going to be a lot of big feelings, probably a lot of frustration, probably a lot of audio hand wringing, if that makes any sense. The U.S. has qualified for the 2024 Copa America. They have advanced to the semifinals of the Concacaf Nations League. But, and to talk about this is my friend Thomas, aka US Keeper. But it was not good. There was two frustrating, sometimes bad, sometimes embarrassing performances from the U.S. men's national team. Thomas, first off, how are you? Have you recovered from having to watch the U.S. men's national team play Trinidad twice in the span of 5 days?
Yeah, I recovered. I was hoping for a little bit more exciting soccer and some better takeaways, but um, unfortunately, we didn't see that. We did qualify for Copa America, as you said, which is, the goal. But I think we have to take every opportunity that the team gets to make the most of it, and I just don't feel that we saw that here in this window.
Two things you said that I just want to build off of as we're doing some opening thoughts. The first is the job was achieved, right? The goal was achieved. Qualify for Copa America, advance to the Nations League. I think you and I'd agree that is the bare minimum expectation for the 11th ranked team in the world and the top 2 or 3 team in this region. If you're going to be that, which is hopefully the goal, yeah, at qualifying for Copa America as one of the top 6 teams from CONCACAF is one of those things. Qualifying for CONCACAF Nations League semifinal is one of those things. So congrats, we got the job done. But I think you and I would agree that we did it the bare minimum. Congratulations. That plus the idea that these were just uninspiring games, and if we're going to try to improve, as you said, every time, the goal is to have the ultimate goal, right, of the Berhalter project right now is to have the best ever finish at a World Cup that the U.S. has ever had while playing on our home soil in 2026. Am I wrong about that?
No, that's correct. I think that's the expectation that fans want to see. The
Right.
diehards for sure.
So to your point, every time we can get the best possible squad together is important. And it almost seemed like we wasted these 2 games because we did not take them A, seriously enough, or B, didn't come out with especially in the first game, the urgency to just kind of put things to bed early. And in the second game, didn't keep our heads longer than 45 minutes. This was a very disappointing window from the U.S. men's national team because the performances were bad as well as the results.
Yeah, you can't have that at this point. I mean, it's it'd be one thing if you had a new manager in there and they're trying different things. And there's some different things that we'll discuss that they did try, and I kind of see those as I don't know about positives, but it's exciting to see. But you have to be able to, you know, you know, put it together. I mean, we're talking about the 99th team in the world that you're playing here. Like, there's no, it shouldn't be that. It should be a much better result, and in general. Again, they
The result should still, like, even if the performance is bad, the result, I agree, should still be positive. And we got one positive result, one negative result. So I'm with, like, this team is a bad team that we were playing. The roster does not stack up to our roster. The fact that we, still advanced despite losing is fine. Glad we set ourselves up in that situation. But it felt to me like this team and the coaching staff didn't really feel like these were cutthroat, do or die type matches.
yeah, that mentality thing. I talk about a lot is kind of important when we look at the growth of a program, of a team that's heading into, the biggest stage um, that we're ever going to see, at this point, right? In terms of the World Cup in the United States. I mean, they hold all the records for previous World Cups viewings and attendance, and that was only 24 teams at that time, and then now it's going to be doubled. So all that other expectation is out there. So you have to take that opportunity and go out there and do that. And you've got, to me, it's lost on me a little bit because you're down a couple players for injury, but figure it out. Like you're all playing at a very high level, and so
Yeah, the replacements to those injured players were still better than anything the other team had.
right. And when you look at that, you just say, well, what's going on here? Were they not prepared? Was the coaching staff not prepared for them? Like it can't be the same old. It can't be the same old thing we saw last cycle. Look, Greg's here. He's not going anywhere. I mean, obviously he
Certainly not
failed.
anytime soon.
Right. If he had failed to qualify for the Copa America, that's a different story. But he did what he needed to do from that perspective. But I'm not seeing anything different from Greg. That leads me to believe that he learned anything from that last cycle. Maybe you could say he's trying new things and maybe he's taking
Yeah,
these opportunities, but you're not even hearing him say that. Like, you're not even hearing that, like, that narrative kind of come out there. It's just, um, and that's discouraging because we're supposed to be moving trajectory wise in a different direction, and we're not. We're just kind of maintaining what it was.
yeah. Well, let's set the scene real quick. So the U.S., I mentioned they qualified for Copa. They've advanced to the Concacaf Nations League semifinals. We did that because we beat Trinidad and Tobago 3-0 at home, but lost 1-2 on the road. So what happens? We win 4-2 on aggregate. Now, I think it's you look at that. Okay, it's not the worst, but you compare that to, and I hate comparing, but you compare that or allude this back to the qualification cycle for the 2022 World Cup, where the U.S. goes and beats Panama 5-1 on the final home match, and then knowing that we have to go to Costa Rica and basically not lose by a significant scoreline. A very similar situation here where we did enough to put ourselves in a position where the road match against a CONCACAF team that we have historically struggled with on the road is inconsequential. Is that fair to say what the situation was?
Yeah, I think for the I mean, if they had scored a fourth, I think at that point it's not even debatable.
Right.
But there's still there's still a match result that you need to
Yeah.
perform.
In both instances, they go out and lose to this team who I will again just reiterate they are an inferior team and they don't look good. And I think that was the problem for me in the Costa Rica match was we didn't look good. And then you look at the Trinidad match, we looked good for about 35 minutes. Then Sergio Dust gets a red card, and then everything just falls to pieces. And it was immediate collapse, an immediate collapse. It wasn't like, oh, well, we defended with 10 men for 50 minutes, and then all of a sudden we gave up a couple goals at the end when they were grasping to just try to get something. It was an immediate capitulation.
Yeah, I mean it was everything changed. I mean the tone of what happened. I mean Dest, he was fighting with his talking back to the ref, talking back to his team. He wouldn't get off the field. I mean the team was rattled. The
Yeah.
team was rattled. They were
Yeah.
focused, in the wrong way, um, and that impacted them. And I think that I would assume managers go through scenario based opportunities in matches, and I'm sure red cards is like, hey, if this player gets a red card or whatever, how are we going to adjust the lineup, right? And so, I mean, obviously taking Rayner out, which I think he was going to come out anyway at halftime, seems somewhat logical. Get that right back in there and go in
I,
there, but you should still have two strikers up top, and neither one of
yes.
them is really controlling of the ball. So I'm not sure that's necessarily the best move, but I think
I want to talk about the sub for a second because there's been this discourse on Twitter, and I see both sides where you take off Gio because you were probably not going to play him 90 minutes anyway. go ahead and get him off, put on a right back so you can keep your back four. The problem was for me was twofold. One, you didn't even try to tinker a little bit because Des got the yellow card, the double yellow card in the
39.
39th minute, right? It's not asking too much to reshape things a little bit and just ride it out until halftime. But you take off Geo, and now all of a sudden our midfield is just straight up trash. I'm sorry, they were. And that was frustrating because it seemed like you made this defensive change, but the message to the team wasn't, hey, let's batten down the hatches and be resolute defensively. They were not defending either in a low block or anything. And to me, that was also a mistake. It wasn't just, we can debate if Gio should have been taken out, whatever. I think the bigger issue was somehow the team didn't get the message that we're defending now.
Yeah, I mean, they just they I don't know, everything kind of froze. They just stopped attacking, doing any sort of defense or anything towards the ball, and they just there was a counter, and the goal was scored. I mean, and it was so yeah, there was no. And this is where I think coaching comes into it, right? You have to. It's a scenario-based situation. It doesn't happen very often. Red cards don't happen very often. I mean,
No.
really. And so that's the thing. Like you've got to be able to say, "Hey, this is a scenario situation, and we have to be able to, you know,
Yep.
adjust to that in that moment and figure it out." And it's clear that it's not something they went over, right? Because there was no real pivot to that.
Well, before we keep talking more about the second game, let's talk a little about the first game of this series. U.S. hosted. They won 3-0, beating Trinidad at home in Austin, a place that has been historically pretty good for the U.S. and especially in these Nations League or big matches before going down to South America or Latin America and the Caribbean. You get a 3-0 win. I would characterize this performance as frustrating, but not bad. And I think a lot of people will characterize it as a bad performance because it did take 81 minutes for us to score. It took, nearly 50 minutes for us to score against a 10-man team. And while I agree with that, it's not like the team wasn't not producing shots or chances. And, you do have to give some credit to the Trinidadian goalkeeper for making some good saves and also blame some of the players for, quite frankly, not putting the ball in the back of the net, which they should have. However, it's also fair to say that there weren't enough good chances or clear chances created. But I will counter that, just say Trinidad, unlike what we did down there, they put 10 players behind the ball. And when they only had 10 men, they put 9 players behind the ball. So, or, basically everyone behind the ball at all given times. They kept a back line of 5. They're very, very compact defensively. And they frustrated the hell out of us. And to me, to build off your coaching point, it felt like Greg set the team up and instructed them, go get an early goal, and then more will come. And when the goal didn't come early or didn't even come in the first half, he didn't think that we needed to tinker even the slightest bit, despite players not having good games. He didn't find the need to just change anything, even a little bit, to try to give Trinidad a different look. We just kept going and going and going until we finally made some subs. But it's just another example of Greg not really adjusting to the game state outside of what he thinks the game is going to be.
Yeah, I mean that's spot on. I mean it's very frustrating, to see that. Again, I think you're right. I think he expected to get an early goal in the, 10, 15-minute mark or whatever it is, and then that changes the match. But you have to really give Trinidad some credit on that because they held, because again, if Trinidad loses 1-0, even 2-0,
They've
you know
got
what
a
I mean?
chance.
They have a
Yeah.
chance, and they and,
Yeah.
and so that's all they were looking to do. I don't think they were looking to win because
No.
nothing indicated that they didn't. They
No.
had no possession, no shots, almost no attack in that match. And so that adjustment there, I think you have to look at that. And so, look, I'll give Greg credit. I wouldn't say excited, but I was nice to see a different formation idea, right? I've never even seen that formation, frankly, and it's a little odd to me of a formation. But I think it's good to see that he's trying something new. But in trying something new for the first time, maybe you need to say, hey, we're 25 minutes into this. Let's maybe, plan B is, sliding someone centrally and pulling, whatever it was, right?
Right.
You can't be so hard and fast with certain things, but you also want to give them appropriate time to be able to work and see if you can work through them. So there is that balance. And so,
Yeah.
and but fine, give it the half. But in the second half, it's still, there was a,
Yeah.
you
It
know,
took him 65 minutes to make subs. And again, I don't want to beat up too much on Kevin Paredes because he's young. I still think he's very talented, but it was just very clear, in my opinion, the kid was not up to the challenge in that game. It was also very clear to me that Tillman was not operating well on the right wing. Those are changes you could have made at halftime.
yeah. I mean, I like to see those players in there, but I don't think they were put in positions for success. And so that's not fair to the player, right? It's like saying,
Right.
here, go out there, do whatever. It's like, I've always been on the fence about playing players out of position. I think certain players can do it because they have skill and, in knowledge and, all those
Hmm.
sorts of things. There are other players that need to be in that position, especially young ones, so they can be comfortable going into a match that matters, in that sort of environment. And I think both, Perez and Tillman just, were not put in positions for success in that
Yeah.
match. And I think that's poor. That's on the manager to be able to evaluate that, in the
Yeah.
moment, because he was just trying to fill holes. I just don't think those are the two players that should have been playing in those positions. In general, there would have been a different set of players I would have used, in that. But that's just me. I mean, I'm not the
Yeah.
manager, so but that's my, evaluation of it.
And I don't even think it's unfair to put Paredes on the left wing. That's where he's comfortable. But it was just clear that in this particular setup, they weren't going to succeed, you know? And that's not, I don't, I think the problem is for me, as I say all the time, both teams are trying to play, both teams are trying to accomplish something on the field. So it was, I think, naive of Greg to think that Trinidad wasn't going to just pack it in and put a bunch of players inside the box. And to again, Paredes is a very talented player. His strength is not trying to break down a low block. It's not combining. It's getting behind players with pace and, you know, using that to his advantage. And that wasn't going to happen in this game.
Yeah, I did. They, that's where you have to be able to adjust and pivot on that.
Yeah.
And it concerns me because we can't see it done and successfully done against the Trinidad and Tobago. What are we going to see when we're playing elite talent? You know what I mean? You're going to have to come up with these better game
Yeah.
plans. I mean, look, to Greg credit, he did it for the first three group stages of the World Cup. So I'll give him credit for that. But why doesn't it transfer into these other matches against teams of a much less quality, right?
Well, but
Like,
also in matches that still mean something. I think that's what bothers me is he almost treated these as like training exercises, but with like slightly more competition. And it's like, buddy, these are matches that we have to win. And yeah, you beat Trinidad 3-0. Congratulations. But it was very clear that Trinidad felt way more pressure, urgency, and fire and desire to perform well in these matches than the US did.
yeah, for sure. And that's the thing. I mean, and there again, there is a fine line, and this is where I think it's challenging to have the same manager coming in with supposedly new ideas, but not really seeing those new ideas kind of translate on the field. Like, you have to. Where's the line between trying new things but also being successful in qualifying for Copa America
Right.
and winning another Nations League, right? So, there is a fine line there. Look, I don't have any the Greg had plenty of opportunity last cycle to try these other things, right?
Yep.
It's the same group of players, that we've been seeing, for the last several years. So it's something that, I don't think Greg's figured out yet, and so now he's just trying. Well, I tried something new, it didn't work, right? Okay, so I'm gonna go
Right.
back to the 4-3-3 and be done with it.
It was just frustrating. And again, it's frustrating because we didn't score when we were dominating the game. I mean, again, I hate to like go back to that, but even if we had won this game 1-0, you look at the way we played, you look at the flow of play, you look at the stats, and you go, we dominated this game. The problem was we didn't put the ball in the back of the net. And some of that I think was down to a little bit of, and I don't think this is necessarily Greg's fault, but some of the players were a little too happy to rely on not necessarily crosses, because in the first half I don't think they were crosses. The second half it was, but there were those chip balls from both McKinney and Reyna standing about 20, 25 yards out, and they were trying to loft the ball over the back line, which was already so deep, and they're trying to find that winger or Balogun cutting in, and it didn't work once or twice, and it was like, okay, but like we did it a lot and it wasn't working any single time. And that is where I go, okay, guys, y'all have to understand as players how to try to like find another way, and that's where I don't blame Greg necessarily. The players also have to recognize, okay, this particular combination isn't working yet. Let's find another let's find another combination.
Yeah, they just they didn't deviate from the game plan, and maybe but at some point the players have to be able to do that and feel comfortable doing that. So maybe they don't
Yeah.
feel comfortable doing that. I just is what I
That's
wonder.
another problem. And that seems to be the theme that we've seen, I think, recently is maybe the mentality and the personality of the head coach has now permeated too much into the players where they are afraid to deviate from the game plan because we know Greg loves his system and he loves his game plan.
Yeah, but the thing about the thing is that you have to have a little bit more free flowing, right? Like these we've said it before. These players don't get together all that much. You have to be able to let the talents that they have,
Yep.
be able to kind of come into play there, right? Attacking space, open space, like dribble the ball, like don't just like I think Moose is a good example that that was really good. He was attacking a lot of space, um, in especially down in Trinidad. I loved it because
Yeah.
like that sort of you can see a lot of different ways he plays, but like that's the sort of thing, like you break it down that way, then it opens things up, right? Someone double teams them, and then you can spit it out and do different things, and so you get too rigid into a game plan, and especially a new one. And I think that's part of the problem too. These players just were trying to follow the game plan, and maybe it was just too complex. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
he obviously had something in mind that they worked on during camp for that 4-2-2-2, but
4-2-2-2 slash really it was a 2-4-4 in the Trinidad game. And that's not Greg's fault. That's just because of the way that, we were just we were camped out in their half. Um, but it was a nice little formation, especially in that second half and in the second game where you saw the two strikers set up. It wasn't bad, and I think that's the positive that I take away from this entire window is that Balogun and Pepe weren't bad together. There were times where they didn't quite know how to move with or off each other, but I'm willing to accept that more as they haven't tried it in live action that much more than the whole system is bad because I thought that that worked well even in the second game. And because again, we get a goal, in that second game in the first half. I thought we had multiple chances before that to score. And if you look at the first game, when Pepe comes on, that is almost the catalyst to us actually looking actually dangerous and looking like we could actually score a goal. So I think the positive for me is the two striker setup or whatever you want to call it actually kind of worked during this window.
yeah, it was nice to see that. I mean, I was surprised that Greg actually went with that in the second match. I thought it was pretty good. Um, I wanted to see it, and those are the things that you want to see. You want to try out to see what it is. I mean, on the other side, I mean, Pepe's been so successful coming off the bench. It's like,
Yeah.
like he probably hates the role, but like he excels at it. Like probably no one I've ever seen on the
Yep.
national team do. So I think you have to kind of take that piece of it. He obviously fits in. There's not a huge amount of competition at striker right now, so he's kind of fall. I mean, Balogun hasn't looked great. But again, part of that is he's still getting used to it, and in different groups of players. So I think we have to be patient with some of this stuff too. It's they're trying, but we have to at some point settle on something. And I think we're going to see
Yeah.
a lot more trying between now and Copa America. In the small opportunities that they have to be able to put something out there and see what it's going to be, so that they can have a deep run there. Because I mean, that's so important.
Do we want to keep talking about the games themselves, or do you want to move on to like just the go back to the bigger picture stuff?
Not really. I mean,
Okay.
I'm sure we'll touch back on them, but
Let's go back to just the overall thought about this, because I think there's a lot of people who are so quick to blame Greg Berhalter. And don't get me wrong, he deserves a lot of blame in this. But at some point too, the players have to take ownership of not playing well, not performing well, not having the mentality to really kick on and go seize a game that they should seize. Again, I thought it was better in the second game, but the first game, it didn't. It seemed like we were like, okay, we're going to do this and we're going to get a goal and we're going to win and it'll be fine. Instead of really saying, let's go get a goal, let's go dominate, let's go win. And those little mentality things just don't seem to be the default for this team. Yes, Greg plays a big role in that. But as you said, we don't see these players all that much. The players do have to take some sort of ownership over their own mentality and their own performances.
yeah, I think it's a product of this Nations League, to be completely honest. I mean, this, we're at the third iteration here. It's just going and going and going, and there's
It feels
no
like we've played Nations League matches like 27 times, even though
right,
we've only played like 4 of them.
but there's no real competition until you get to the to the final
Yeah,
round of it. And so, and at that, and so now it's just walking through the motion. So that's where you got to be careful, right? That's where the players have to be careful. That's why you have to, this is maybe where Greg needs to bring in a little bit more and say, hey, you're not starting this match, right? Maybe you try to find combinations to see what's going to work on the field, as well as also being able to, say, hey, Sardinio, you're not starting this match. We're going with Scally. Like, create competitions within the team so that players want to be doing that. Just don't give them the positions, in general. I
right.
mean, there's some that earn them, and Dest is one, and Turner's another. But like, that who's next in line, really? I mean, you have players you could play there, and there's some complacency because we haven't seen that. And the problem is you're playing the same group of crappy teams over and over again, right? And so,
Yeah,
where's the carrot for these guys? They've done this before, so it's kind of old hat. And so I think that's a problem of the way this Nations League has been set up, is you have no other opportunity to play anything else. I mean, from a competitive perspective, they've created this little bubble of tournament, but at the end of the day, you have to look at the players and say, look, this still matters. And if you're not going to be giving your full effort, then we're going to bring in players that will, to maybe give them an opportunity to try that. Maybe you lose in that scenario, and you don't win it. And so, because I just think they take it for granted. Yeah, we're the U.S. We've been dominating, but that's a bad attitude to have in a year where you're in a country hosting a World Cup, because you're not going to have a lot of real competitive opportunities outside of Copa America and hopefully that expanded Gold Cup in
yeah.
2025.
I mean, look, we've now played Trinidad 4 times since 2020, right? Obviously, one of those was the Gold Cup this summer. This is the third time we've seen them this year. So I do agree with your point of like, when you're constantly seeing the same teams, it, how do I say this without offending all of CONCACAF? There are only a handful of teams in this region that truly challenge the U.S. on a competitive basis. So I understand why the players look at this Trinidad team and go, we beat them 6-0 this summer. We beat them 7-0 the last time we played them. You know, let's just go out there and be good and we'll get the job done. And while that's true, as we saw, especially in that first game, again, I think the problem is just getting the job done seems to be the goal, as opposed to going to be proving you're the dominant team in the region.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, there's no fire there, and so that, again, on the players, also on the manager, to be able to get that out of them, right? Like, and that's, I think that's a product too of having a the second cycle
Yeah,
manager.
that's where I'm at. And I tweeted this earlier today. Follow me on Twitter at Soccer for Us Pod, but I'm not against Berhalter as a coach. I think he has pluses and minuses, as do all coaches. I also think that the narrative that we somehow would have pulled Jose Mourinho if we had just actually spent money is moronic because A, we don't have the money to pay Jose Mourinho, despite what they want to say, and B, he's probably not coming here. But my issue in hiring a coach for the second cycle who, without trying to dismiss the Nations League or Gold Cup, didn't really accomplish much, right? When you look at a lot of coaches who have been hired for a second cycle, someone today was like, "Oh, well, 5 of the 8, you know, quarterfinalists from the last World Cup were second cycle coaches." Yeah, Didier Deschamps won a damn World Cup in 2018. He can keep the job. The Croatian head coach made a World Cup semifinal and was runners up to the UEFA Nations League the next time around. He can keep his job. Same with the Portugal head coach, winning Euro 20, what is that? Whatever it was. Like, earning your second cycle is one thing. Greg, in my opinion, didn't really earn a second cycle. He goes through the rehiring process because apparently it was him and Jesse Marsh, and that was really the only two to go with. What I'm concerned with, and what I'm always concerned with second cycle national team head coaches, is that the biggest problem can be complacency. I'm not saying these players are happy with only beating, like, I don't know that because I don't know them. But as we've talked about several times before this and on this podcast, there does seem to be a group of players that are in actual starting contention, maybe 13, right? Everyone else is just playing for a spot on the roster and to maybe come off the bench. And these Nations League matches, on top of that, don't feel like truly high stakes until, as you said, we get to the semifinal and final. So all of this just feels like right now, okay, we'll go out there and play Trinidad. Let's go get the job done. And we're complacent in getting the job done is fine. We're complacent in, yeah, well, these are my starting 11. Or, it is, I'm hoping we don't get to that. I'm not saying that is a permanent state. Just saying that's how it feels right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to disagree with that. I mean, because we've seen nothing that would indicate otherwise at this point. And so, where's that motivation? Where, because again, there's no qualifying either, right? So that makes it even worse in some respects. So that really puts you in a situation where you just, like, it's gonna just happen, where, we've already qualified. What's the worst that happens, right? But the players have to understand that you're building to something more, right? You're like, and maybe that's again in the messaging. Greg's got to get one of these PowerPoints out there that, that's going to allow, to see, there's a progression, right? Having a stupid, tagline, that says, oh, best, no, see how, change how the world views American soccer. That doesn't mean anything. That's not a path to that. That's just a statement. And so, and obviously we're not seeing everything, that comes through this, but like you get a sense that nothing has really still changed with this. And so, and again, that's part of the reason. It's that you have to kind of refresh it, flip it over, right? Players have to have a sense of urgency within that, saying, "Geez, I've got to fight for my
Yes.
spot." I now, because Greg has his same group of players, right? Like, we've seen them. Now, granted, they're not the MLS ones anymore, which is great.
Yep. But here's the other thing too, and this is the double-edged sword that I can't blame Greg for, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not like there's a whole lot of players that have suddenly become challengers for those guys who should be starting. Balogun's the only one. Gio's maybe the other. It's not like there's a lot of other guys out there in the pool who have suddenly challenged for starting positions.
No, I think we've talked about in the past. I think there's a few spots, center back being one of them, where you could bring a couple guys
Sure.
in, but I don't think there's any like holy cows type of situation. If you have, if you start talking about fully healthy rosters, does Josh Sargent push one of the strikers? Maybe. It's hard to say, right? But you look at that, getting Adams back is going to be, a helpful thing because we have
That
some
will,
holes there.
yeah, absolutely.
So you have some of those things in there, but in doing that, you also have to figure out how you're going to work with this, because I said it last time, you're not going to be able to roll the same starting 11 lineup out there, right? Every match. So you're going to have different, tactics, different leaders on the field, because you're going to burn out your 11. And so you have to, that's where the opportunities are here in those matches where you don't have Weah and Pulisic. Say, hey, you know, this really didn't work, right? So we modified it with different players, and yeah, maybe it looked a little bit better to start the match, right? And so,
I
maybe
mean,
just
it did. Yeah, I think that's
yeah,
fair, right? I mean, to give Greg some credit, he saw that the two striker formation worked in the second half of the first game, and he said, "Let's start the game that way." And to give Greg credit, and what I think truly was the game plan, and we got it, was if you get a goal early, and by early I mean even in the first half, you've completely altered the algebra for what Trinidad then has to do, right? You get a goal, and now they have to win five. They have to score five because you have that away goal and they don't. So sure, we changed some things. We pushed for that. That's good. But as soon as we met adversity, what happened?
yeah, and I think and that's the one thing, and when you look at that, and so I don't think Greg adjusted well in that moment for in that after the red card, right? Like I think you know, I don't know. You see it all the time. Teams are quick to sub when they lose a player to
Sure.
replace
Yeah.
another player. It happens all the time. Pulisic was a product of it. AC Milan a couple weeks ago, right? He
Yep.
got the one pulled. There was a red card, so he got pulled out. Right or wrong, it just it's the tactic that you see on that. I mean, part of it, could you have held out for the half? I don't know, but his adjustment took away a quality midfielder, right? Because at that point, what are you going
Right.
to do? I mean, Reina was probably coming out anyway, but when Tillman came in later in the match, they actually had some attack in
A
there,
100%. Yeah. 100%.
and so that was great to see. And it's like, okay, this is actually, you know, this, you know, this is actually, you can maybe survive this. Maybe you can tie it up, right, and at least get a draw out of it. Because that's what I was hoping for. Because you definitely saw the kind of change, a little bit more tactically, and definitely a little bit more energy when he came on.
Tell me if I'm crazy, because I could be. But instead of immediately responding with the sub, which I'm not saying is right or wrong, I'm just saying let's play with this because Des gets his at 39th minute. You know, we're almost at halftime, right? We got to go 6 minutes of normal time. And in total, it was about 10 minutes of play. What if you would have put Brendan Aronson at right back and played, you know, kept that 4-3-2 shape that we ended up still playing with because we took off a midfielder and put him at right back. And then got to the halftime and said, okay, how do we want to do this? Do we want to take off Balogun? Do we want to take off Pepe? Do we want to take off Gio? Who do we want to take out? Do we want to make two changes at halftime? I feel like he both overthought but underthought. He thought, well, we're already taking Gio off, so we'll just take him off now. And what that did was throw out of balance the midfield we had, but also left two strikers on the field when we didn't need two strikers.
Yeah, I don't think Greg thought it off. I think he thought, yeah, Reina's coming off. Let's just get him off now, and then we'll replace the right back with Scally. And so I don't think he thought outside of that. And I think it's a double move anyway. I think you have to make two moves in that
Yeah,
moment. Based on having two strikers, you can't. I think you can no longer be successful in that formation with ten men on the field. So
yeah,
I think that and then again, I think this comes with inexperience for Greg. I just think this is where the inexperience is massive. He's not able to make that on the fly, which again, maybe that's why you hold out, right? Can you
yeah,
can you hold out for 10 minutes, of time, to be able to say, okay, now we can reset. Let me get with my coaches,
yeah.
because you've got to make that decision pretty quickly. And you know, I don't know if it.
Let's be honest though, they didn't have to make it quickly because Gio took or Serginho took about 27 minutes to get off the damn field. So,
I know,
I mean,
yeah,
it was
but yeah,
pretty evident. But yeah, I mean, it is.
yeah, and so yeah, again, I just think that's where the inexperience comes in with Greg. I
Mhm.
just don't think he's sharp and quick to make those decisions. 'Cause I don't think he's seen enough of it, right? That's the thing. I don't think he's seen
It
enough of it at that
it
level.
deviates too much from the game plan. And if it deviates from the game plan, he doesn't know how to react. So the
Right.
game plan that he defaulted to was, oh, well, we're already going to take Gio off. We'll take him off now. And you still probably could have taken Gio off at halftime or something, right? If that's the plan, I'm fine with it. I get it. Especially if you get to halftime and you're up 1-0, we're good. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you lose 2-1 in the second half because Trinidad just throwing people forward, and you're like, oh, look, we're going to defend the best we can, I can almost stomach that just because Trinidad is in desperation mode. Problem is, we didn't even get to that point. He
No,
makes a change, and immediately we give up a goal.
yeah. Yeah, and that's it's the whole thing is I mean, I saw it coming though. Like I'm like, can we hold on? I mean, I played it out in my head. I'm like, this is what's gonna happen. Like, and I'm sitting there kind of like chuckling to myself saying, I knew this was going to happen. Like,
Yeah.
after the red card happened, right? Like, because the team just fell apart. And I think that's another issue with where we are. So we, this team is still very young. Let's not forget that. Okay. We don't have true leaders on this team. And that's not to say that, I question if Pulisic is that or not. I question if Adams is there or not because they're still young, right? Those players are still young too. Look, you've got Ream, but I'm not sure he's any.
But Adams
He's
and
one
Pulisic weren't here at this game. Neither
right,
was Wes McKinney, who was another kind of like big personality on the field.
right.
So to be fair, I think if you were to give me my top three choices for captain, Tyler, Christian, Wes are probably the top three. And then maybe Ream is in there as well. So, I mean, it's fair to say we didn't have our leaders on the field, but I'll give Gio credit. I thought he was a good leader in this match. He tried to calm Serginho down.
Oh, he did. I mean, I don't think it didn't matter. I mean, he got tried to come. I think Turner
Well,
tried.
Serginho at that point
Yeah,
had, yeah, the bomb had been, or the fuse had been lit and the
yeah,
bomb was exploding.
yeah. And that was a disgusting just behavior. Like, and that's the sort of thing like that's the sort of thing where that immaturity comes into play. We got to have that composure. Like DeAndre Yedlin was always a player that I felt didn't have that, and he always would lose it, in certain moments in matches, and just cost the team, by those acts. And again, it drags everything down. It changed the momentum. The headspace wasn't right for them to continue playing at the level they were. And they were kind of in shambles, and they weren't prepared to deal with that. So like, you've got to, as a coach, you've got to prepare for a red card or an injury or something that's
Yeah.
unexpected, and know what the next move is going to be. Like you have to, it's scenario based coaching. You have to be able to figure that out, and what it's going to look like in those cases. Because you kind of, some of the stuff, like it seemed like Gio was coming off at half anyway, no matter
Yeah,
no
which
matter
is
what this.
again, that is fine. And
Right.
it's like I totally respect that. Like, yo, especially after you're up 1-0, plans in place. Let's rock it. Like, cool. Get to halftime, you're up 1-0. Gio comes out, you put in Tillman maybe, and he continues that. But it just was like he didn't want to deviate from that. And I just again, I think sometimes I think he almost overthought it because to me, the most simple solution in that scenario right there is you take off Balogun or Pepe to put on Scally. So you keep your 4 defenders, 4 midfielders formation. And instead, you kept 2 strikers in a match where at this point, we're not trying to score we're not at that point. And again, I don't think that message was ever relayed to the team or that mentality was ever out there. At that point, the goal is to just not concede. You're up 1-0, you're up 4-0 in the tie. Just you get a red card, fine. Try to score on us. And we made it just so easy for them.
Yeah, I mean, look how well Trinidad played with 10 men,
Yeah,
you know,
because
against
their whole goal was to not give up a goal.
right. I mean, can you imagine if they played 11 players all match? Does the U.S. even score 3 goals?
I mean, I think eventually, yes.
Maybe,
But
but
to your point, it's like, yeah, they who knows?
right, and that's the thing, and so and that's what
We
they're
gave
hoping
up
for in
two
that game.
goals. We gave up 2 goals with 10 men. They gave up 3, but it took us Literally, the red cards happened at almost the exact same minute of the game. Theirs was in the 38th, ours was in the 39th. We gave up 2 goals within the next 20 minutes of that event. Let me make sure I have this right. Yeah, 2 goals in the 20 minutes after that event happened. So it's just, again, the mentality, and I don't want to sound like Carly Lloyd talking about mentality. I'm just saying that, like, in this game, the mentality was not, let's go out and it didn't shift to, okay, now we got to really dig in and try to not concede.
And it has to, right? You have to be able to do that on the road. I mean, in general, like you've got to be able to say, okay, take the wins where you can get them, but also then at some point, you have to change that mentality and that game plan and say, look, this is where it is. We're up 1-0. Let's bunker in for the next 10 minutes and let the coach kind of adjust at halftime.
Yeah.
And suppose they weren't given that opportunity to do. I mean, they're
And
given the
look,
opportunity, but the coach wasn't given the opportunity.
if you concede that free kick goal, which Matt Turner should have saved, I think you and I would agree with that. Okay, you gave up a free kick goal. It happens, especially when you're up 10 or down to 10 men. Unfortunately, the free kick goal happens on occasion. I can live with that. I can go, well, Matt Turner had a bad moment. I expect Matt to be better. But that was not the singular problem.
Yeah, I mean, it all came. I don't know. It all just fell apart. It just and again, that's where there's the margins on the road. I mean, that you have to, you know, I don't know. The road stuff drives me nuts, right? Because
Let's put a pin in that because we're going to come back to a tweet that you had earlier, right before the game, the day of the game, talking about those road performances. But let's quickly, well, probably not quickly, let's talk about the Serginho Dest incident because there is this narrative on Twitter of people saying, oh, he never needs to see the team again. He needs to be out for a year, whatever. What do you think we need to do about Serginho Dest? Because I do think there needs to be some level of accountability more than just he apologized. Does that make sense?
yeah, I think it's a yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean,
I don't either.
I think that's the problem. I don't know how you handle it. I mean, part of it is like, I it's to me, it's I don't know what set it off. It was just it was an odd like circumstance of things. The
Yeah,
I don't think it was a foul that much. I don't think it wasn't like he was even went down hard or anything. Like,
I
and
don't
then
think the
and
foul that he was mad about was even a foul.
and then the ball kind of probably was in still, but they
Yeah,
called it out. And then I don't know if that set it off. And then like he just could not compose himself. He had no self control there.
no.
And and to me that I mean that's where I get like if you're out there and you're tackling someone hard and you get a card, fine, like that happens, right? Like that's
Yeah.
part of the game. But when you get yellow cards for that sort of behavior, to
A
me that
ball in and out of a throw in and
yeah,
out of play, like, dude. And
like you
I'm not even mad at like the punting the ball away because that's almost like a CONCACAF thing to do of like, oh, well, you gave me a bad call. I'm going to punt this ball out of the stands because Trinidad only has 3 balls to begin with. But then it just kept going.
yeah,
I
he
don't,
couldn't lock it in, and then at that point he I don't know. I mean, again, maybe he said it doesn't matter if I'm on the field or not, if we have 10 men or not. They're still we're still going to advance. And again, this that weird just that
I know.
it's that composure that these young players, and they're still young, need to
Yeah.
figure out because you cannot have that. You cannot not have him on the field, right? He's one of your better talented players that needs to be out there. And so
Look,
you know,
he's
I
to me one of the top 3 to 4 most skilled players with the ball at their feet.
yeah,
You
and
know,
and he does a lot of things well on the attack. He's defensively he could be better, but he's having a pretty good season right now, and
yeah.
he's found his a good spot for him. But I don't know how you handle players like that. I'm trying to think back to players of that caliber who've been on the U.S. That have created that sort of unrest there because he
I
wouldn't
mean,
listen to anyone.
Jermaine Jones, but I feel like even he, I don't know.
Yeah, I was trying to look to see who got
And I think also one of the issues that I genuinely do take heart to, because having been in locker rooms and in teams, the disrespect he showed his teammates was problematic. It wasn't just disrespect toward the ref. He was fighting with his teammates, and again, it was like, why are we fighting with teammates over the referee maybe not calling a foul? Which again, it kind of could have been maybe a foul. I don't think it was really much of a foul. If anything, I think he ran into the Yunus Musa, which is why I was upset. And then a ball in and out of play, like, bro, what are we arguing about? And then you take it out on your teammates. That was bad from Serginho.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you Greg's got to walk a fine line in terms of how
Yeah.
he's communicating with this, how he handles it, right? Because again, it's you don't want to lose a player in terms of that respect, but you also need to kind of say, hey, look, I mean, because look, McKinney, I guess McKinney is probably the other most recent situation, and mind you, his discretion was he broke a team rule,
Right. And that
right, and
was,
that's
yeah,
and
yeah,
so that's kind of, I mean, but again, it's in the same vein. You've got there's rules you have to follow, and he didn't follow it. So
yeah.
I think, I mean, he's got a red card anyway. I think you try to survive without him for the March.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that to me, you do two things. One, Greg and his mediator friend that he talked with Gio about, have a conversation with Serge and just say, hey man, this wasn't cool. You kind of hurt our team as a whole, but you also kind of hurt some individual teammates. We need you to understand this, and possibly get him involved in some sort of counseling or therapy to kind of get him to talk through some of these, like, hey, because this is twice this year that he's had blowups in a game. And so just go through some therapy things of like, how do we, cognitive behavioral therapy, how do we not have this happen again? We have control of the situation. I'm not saying he needs to like go to counseling and therapy to like figure out why his mom and dad hate him or whatever. I don't know. But like just on the field stuff, there's sports psychologists who can help him with this. The other one is, and I don't, he's already missing the semifinal. So I'm with you. You might just not call him in for March.
Yeah, unless you're in a situation where like roster wise they kind of need him, for that sort of thing. Yeah, I just think you have to. Yeah, I don't know. It's like anything. You have to be punished for
Yeah.
certain behaviors, and you're going to miss out on things. And so the red card's punishment one, but you inflicted that, and maybe there's a team punishment of
Yeah.
that other piece of it. Because at that point, if you don't do it in March, you're not going to do it for
You can't
Copa
do it.
America,
Right.
right? I mean, at that point, like unless he's just not on the radar anymore for whatever
Which
reason,
it can't, I mean, unless he does a John Brooks, like whatever John Brooks ended up doing outside of just not being,
right?
favored by Greg
And
from a player
again, that
standpoint.
that could possibly happen, but like at that point, then there's a bigger problem at
Yeah.
the end, and so I think
I liked Taylor Rockwell from the Total Soccer Show. He said the punishment should be that Serginho, instead of having to miss March, he has to come in for the January camp.
well, he did that last year. So
He has to come back. I saw someone else that he has to spend all winter. I think it was Bells from the Scuff podcast that he has to spend all winter with Greg in Chicago. Um, you know, Something needs to be done, because I think, like we've said, this is not just a red card or like a silly thing that happened in a game. This was more of a detriment to the team than just, oh, you had two bad tackles.
yeah, and I think in the heat of anything, in the heat of those sorts of things, if you've ever been in a situation where you just you've lost it, like you lose it, you don't care. Like there's no, I don't think there's any, and so that again, that's a personal growth thing, right? He's
Hmm.
got to figure out how to control that, right? Because I mean that because that's extreme. I mean, it's extreme to go to those levels and to act at that in that in
Yeah.
that way and not be able to kind of to brush it off and move on, right? Like, fine, punt the ball, get a yellow card, okay, fine. But like,
If he would have just done that, I'd be like, fine, screw it.
right? Yeah, we've seen it. I mean,
CONCACAF,
that's
do it.
right. But he just couldn't. He just could not.
Yeah.
He just could. He just couldn't do it. And so, and
I
then
do think, look, he's 23 years old, so I do think a lot of this needs to come down to like maybe he needs to talk to someone, he needs to figure out on his own, with some guided help of how do we prevent this from happening in the future. I don't mean he needs to do a bunch of soul searching. I just mean there are therapy steps that you can go through to say, okay, when I feel myself doing this, I need to do this, or when I feel this, I need to do this, and that can help him as a professional, and it can definitely help him as, again, we've seen this happen twice, slightly different, but twice in the same year this has happened, both in the Nations League. So maybe Des just doesn't need to play the Nations League ever again. Maybe that's the punishment.
have I'm not familiar. Have we seen that type of behavior at the club level for him?
I don't know if we've seen that I can recall, but I do. It does kind of bring to life the fact that last year especially he was not playing for AC Milan, not playing for Barcelona, all these things, and it's like it does raise questions, I think, fairly, of maybe this is one of those reasons why he hasn't been able to truly stay at a club, because he has some slight of issue like this. But I don't think he has like red card issues with clubs that I can remember.
Right. Yeah. Maybe it's not gone to that level, but I think that's an interesting point you bring up about the ability to stay with a club and find that role, because the thing, he's got to be able
Yeah.
to figure that out.
I mean, he only has one yellow card in this entire league season, and trying to just quickly scroll through his, yeah, he has one yellow card for club this entire year. So, obviously there's slightly higher stakes when you're playing Mexico in a Nations League final than, just another club match. But it's not like he's not playing important club matches either. So I don't know. I do feel like Greg talking with him with some sort of guided help to figure out how do we not let this happen again is probably the best option. And then I would not be shocked if there's some sort of, team penalty as well. Also, I'll say this: I don't know what Concacaf, what their disciplinary committee exactly looks like, but this is a competition, and it's possible that they say that he didn't leave the field in a timely enough manner, and he gets another game ban. To be quite honest.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. I mean, he and they will review that. So
yeah. Regardless, he's missing the semifinal for sure. But the U.S. is there, and I think that's the important thing. However, let's go back to this conversation about away in CONCACAF, because this is the biggest. If you want to be a Greg hater, which I don't think we are necessarily, but if you want to be a Greg hater, I think the number one thing you can always point to is Greg's record in true road matches in CONCACAF is, I don't know, abysmal would be a word I would use.
yeah, it's horrible. I mean, it really. I mean, look, we overall, it's been there hasn't been.
It's not been great.
No, is the best manager has been Bob Bradley, in those situations. But like Greg has been terrible. Like I think up until last night, every road loss had resulted in, now it's 5, had resulted in no goals scored in those matches.
Yeah.
Right. And he's only won one road match.
Well, no, that was a draw. That was Nicaragua was a draw. Yeah. Yeah. No, you're not wrong, because trying to think.
In CONCACAF, so my
Yeah.
referencing my tweet, I got some questions on it, but referencing my tweet was basically, to your point, true matches. And so they're matches that are on the road against the road team that's playing at home, not neutral site situation, because there are some in there that come into play,
and they're not friendlies. These
right,
are
they're not
competitive road matches. Yeah.
Right. And his numbers are just terrible with that. And again, they haven't been great overall with U.S. soccer.
No, but
general,
that's what I think. We understand that going on the road in CONCACAF is hard, period. Because conversely, we're great at home, you know?
Well, that's the thing. That a good example of that is, I think it was in, I don't know, it was either in, must have been in 2010. The U.S. ended up playing. CONCACAF changed the World Cup qualifying, so every team was playing in the second round of it, which was
Yes.
a two-legged match. And so I believe it was in 2010 cycle against Barbados. They played them at home and they beat them like 8-0. They just killed them, right? And then they go down to Barbados and they barely beat them 1-0, right? So you look at that, and say, geez, why such disparity on that? Now, mind you, I don't remember the match all that well, in general, but like, there
Probably
are
weren't able to watch
factors,
it. It was on BN Sports somewhere.
probably being sports, or maybe it was, being, closed circuit. But
Yeah.
you look at that and have to ask yourself, why the disparities? Well, there are reasons for it. I mean, when you're playing in CONCACAF, there's different challenges. Travel exists for that. The fans, the atmosphere, the weather, the fields, all these different things come into play. And I guess my frustration with not just Greg and other managers is that the United States has been willing to do anything they could to be prepared for these Mexico matches, in Aztec. All right. They've slept in these, tents for, you know, the weeks leading up to it so they could handle the altitude and the smog and all these other things, right? They've played their previous match, before Mexico at a high elevation. So that they're training at those levels, along the way. So like they're doing all these things to prepare for Mexico, but what they're missing is they still need to prepare for these other CONCACAF, you know, um, opponents, right? Like in playing in those environments and figure out how they're why they're not doing that. I mean, for Greg to have only won one match, and that match was against Honduras, and they were losing at halftime, I believe, in that match, or they were definitely they conceded the first goal, I believe, in the World Cup qualifying, and then Pepe comes in and saves the day, for them, on the road, and that's it. Like, they just got they just get totally, I don't know, out of sorts. They just can't figure it out for some reason. And to me, it's one of the oddest phenomenons in U.S. soccer. Again, some of these opponents aren't, you know, well, I'll say this much for the opponents. They're the group of opponents when you think about CONCACAF that are the ones that are kind of on the better end of it, right? El
Yeah.
Salvador is decent. Costa Rica, I mean, they've never won in Costa Rica.
Right.
Mexico is obviously good. Canada, I mean, Jamaica, Panama, Honduras, those teams are decent enough to put, at any given time. So,
I
yeah,
mean, the thing that I'll point to is that to kind of build on what you just said is since '94, right? Um, we've only lost twice at Mexico in World Cup qualifying. So clearly that preparation is working. And that's the thing is like, look, you're not going to win every game on the road, especially when you're talking about like Costa Rica and places like that. Like Costa Rica's always been a pretty good team. You add the all the factors you just talked about, but we haven't beaten Mexico, sure, but we're not losing. And the fact that we continually find ways to lose to these quite, plainly lesser teams is infuriating.
yeah, yeah, it definitely is. I mean, you have to see. This is the one thing I've hated for a long time, and is that the U.S. says, hey, for us to qualify for the World Cup, we need to win our matches at home, right? Win at home and get a draw on the road. That's going to give
Right.
us the numbers that we need, right? But you to tell
Which is true.
players to,
That's math.
right, it's the math, right? It works, okay, but if we saw anything from 2018, they were way off. I mean, they lost the one at
Yeah.
home. They couldn't. I mean, Arena didn't
We
even
lost
come
two
in and win.
matches at home. We lost
Right,
two matches at home in the qualifying. We lost to
right.
Costa Rica and Mexico. Costa Rica, we ended up getting wiped there, and we tied Mexico on the road. But we didn't win another road match that cycle.
That's right.
And to your point, if the thought is just go draw, but you've already lost one road home match. You got to go find one on the road.
Well, that's the thing, and you can't. The problem is that you can't have a mentality of a draw. You can't play a match to draw. Like you can't play that way because it's a very defensive way. If we kind of started Iraq is at the World Cup. Once they got that goal, Pulisic came out injured or whatever it was. Like at that point, they kind of were playing to how you would play a match to draw, right? Like you were on the heels the whole. You can't play that way. You have to be on the attack a little bit. You can't always play for that, and that's very hard because things happen, as we saw last night. I mean, look, Turner slips on that. You know that first goal. Okay, that's part of it. He didn't play it well.
Yeah, I
Things
mean,
happen, right?
three errors in one play, they score a goal.
Right. And so it doesn't take a lot to happen, in that. So that's why that mentality for me, I hate it. It stinks. And
Yeah.
get rid of it. Like,
I'll give
and
Greg some credit though for this match. I don't think we played to draw. I think the
no,
goal was to go out there and get a couple goals in the first half and really put it to bed because
yeah, I think I would agree with that, Greg. I think
you
Greg
know,
came out. I mean, the team came out firing, ready to go in
and
that
that's
first
what's
half.
so frustrating is
Right.
up until that red card, it was like, oh man, this is going well.
Right.
Okay,
But where Greg fails for me is he was not able to adjust fast enough
right.
to be after everything happened. And so that fine, Dest was the one that did that, but guess what? You're given the cards you're given. You're the manager.
Yeah,
Figure it out, right?
it continues to be a point of frustration for the Berhalter eras. Is road performances are very bad. Road results are even worse, and the team is struggling to find their best selves when we're on the road or not at home or in any sort of you know contentious arena.
Yeah. And the thing, I guess the good thing is we don't have to see it. Other
Yeah,
than
we don't have
another,
any. We don't have any.
which I don't know if it's a good thing, but like,
Mm.
you've got to there's got to be competitive matches. It's very rare for the U.S. to play road Concacaf matches anyway. I mean, you see a couple a cycle maybe, for friendlies, but it's pretty rare in general. They try to schedule outside of that, so it's, um, yeah, except for probably the next Nations League, um, match. I don't think unless they're trying to squeeze another two more Nations League into this cycle, which probably they will. Um, I don't
Yeah,
expect
I'm
to see
hoping
any.
that we have a break from this Nations League because we have Gold Cup next year. Just let it be Gold Cup, please. We don't need another Nations League. Good
Yeah, they're
lord.
just piling it on.
Um. Anyway, I don't really have much else to say about this, to be honest. It's just frustrating. I want to talk about one thing that's positive, and Atlanta is hosting the first match of Copa America in 2024. Found that out the day of the Trinidad game. Miami's hosting the final, and Andres Cantor reported that LA and Vegas are hosting the semis. So we're finding information out about Copa America. The draw is December 7th. I'm imagining, and from what I've heard from some people with some knowledge of it, that we probably won't find out any more about host cities until then. Um, but at least we're playing in that.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I mean, I imagine we'll see other host cities that are hosting the World Cup. I think that's a fair, and
Yeah,
at this point, get them ready for it. Get the fans in those cities excited for,
yeah.
for the tournament. And yeah, I'm excited for the draw. Hopefully, U.S. falls in pot one, so they don't have to
We
play.
should, and
Yeah,
I do want to hit on that because right now we're the third ranked team between both confederations, and the draw procedure says they're seeding it by FIFA rankings. Now that didn't specify if it was CONMEBOL, top four. It just said top four, and that's how the pots are going. So even with this loss to Trinidad, I find it would be very hard for us to be surpassed by Mexico, who, by the way, lost, Uruguay, or Colombia. Those are the teams around us. So I think we should be pot one for sure.
yeah. I mean, I think gives that positions the U.S. so they're not going to have to play Argentina or Brazil until, and as long as they do what they're supposed to, until the semifinals. So, um, Yeah, I mean, it's fun to watch those sorts of things, see how they play out, and where the matches are going to be for sure, which our fans are definitely excited for because it's right around the corner.
It is. And with that, I think it's time to log off. Thanks, everyone, for listening to this episode of Soccer for Us. Thank you, Thomas, for joining me. You can follow him at US Keeper on Twitter. You can follow me at Soccer for Us Pod. Make sure you support the show at buymeacoffee.com/Soccer for Us Pod. We'll talk in a couple weeks about US women's and some other news going on in US soccer. But for now, thanks everyone for listening. I'm Bart. I'm out.